Hello.
Hey Neil, what's up? How's it going?
Uh,
So, for
Things
the
are going
information of
good.
the audience, Neil had the good opportunity to come stay
Yeah,
with me last
yeah. You're
weekend.
gonna say that.
So he just left a couple of days back. No, I don't miss him. So, yeah, Neil. I mean, how things back home now that you reached India? Pretty sure your mom
It,
also
it,
didn't miss you. She was
it
happy.
feels it feels very very peaceful to be back home. I don't know. I had to sleep with this guy over there, and because of his horrible snoring, I didn't get sleep even for a single
Yeah,
day. So yeah.
that's
So finally, I could sleep
that.
peacefully after coming back.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
just now
So
gonna. Okay, I'm just. Okay, I don't snore first of all, but okay.
yes,
So I don't know what you heard
you do
in the
not
night,
you do
but
not know that.
so I don't know if your own snoring was like so loud that you kept yourself awake, like
That,
it could have gone
that
either
is
ways.
scientifically
But
impossible. Okay.
but yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, so we've got our
Yeah.
audience coming in,
Yes.
Neil.
Yes.
We've
Hi,
got
Chris.
Chris. Hi, Chris
My,
Jacob. Uh,
my name is Punctuality. Yeah,
your
Chris.
no, your name
I
is
saw you
Chris.
waiting like 10
Chris.
minutes before.
Yeah. Hey,
Hi,
Sharon.
Chris.
Welcome
Hey,
to the
Sharon.
show. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So
Cool.
we've
So as more people
finally.
join in, Neil. So our topic for today, yeah,
Yes.
it's literally let's talk about contraception. Okay.
Yep.
So now I'm gonna ask you something very like plain, like really quick here. When I say the word contraception, what image or word comes to your mind first?
I think the first name that comes into my mind is condoms. Yeah,
Okay,
I
it's
think
not a name technically, but okay,
that's
that's a term.
the
Okay.
first thing. Yeah,
Okay, that's the first thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think I recently got to know there is a lot more things other than a
Yeah,
condom
I told you
when
that.
it comes to
Yeah, because of
contraception.
me, I told you that,
Right.
and you know,
Okay.
hence.
Okay. Fine.
Okay.
Fine. Okay.
So yeah, folks. I mean, I genuinely yes. Thank you, Akhil. Thank you for the appreciation. And yes, pills are another one. And when you talk about contraception, it's not only
Yes.
just condoms. We've got pills as well. But yeah, I mean, the internet had really some information to give me on the topic of contraception. There are like some 8 to 10 different methods, different means that you can use as contraceptives in the process of contraception. But before that, Neil, basic definition: what is contraception?
That's very. I don't know. I don't think I'm the right person to define
Really,
that.
we're gonna go
Yeah.
there. We're gonna go there, Neil. Contraception
Yes.
is
Yes.
nothing very to be very simply put. Contraception is but preventing pregnancy. That's like the basic of
Okay.
contraception. There is, Neil. You know,
Okay. You're the person who's read up everything. Okay. So.
not yeah yeah. So
Okay. Yes. So I think, I think Johnny's very limited information is, I think, boring us a little bit. So I
oh
think we have the right person here with us to talk to us about this. So we have the guest for the day. I think you would have seen her in the poster. Some of you might already know her, might have listened to her. And recently, I think a year back, she had visited India for a conference. So sometimes some of you, she is already a familiar face. So I would like to welcome Camille. Hey.
Camille,
Hi. Hello,
Yes.
welcome,
gentlemen.
Welcome.
welcome,
Thank
welcome
you.
to this show. Welcome to the Catholic Chai. It's such an honor and privilege to have you here today.
Oh, for me
It-
too.
it's so nice to have you here today. And yeah, as you know, Camille, I think this topic which you have spoken volumes about, which you are really passionate about spreading the true knowledge, especially in line with the teachings of the church. Let's talk about contraception, Camille.
Okay, let's
Talk
do
about
it.
Yes,
contraception. Let's
yes.
do it.
So I think,
So
so I think before that, just a small intro about Camille. So Camille is based in the US. She is the co-founder and the president of Healing the Culture, which is a non-profit organization which inspires people to be permanently pro-life. And she's in the last 20 years, she has inspired a lot of politicians, a lot of medical professionals, judges, lawyers, a lot of people to actually support life and to value what life is. So we have a person who's probably created a revolution in our country. So we are honored to have you here, Camille.
folks, we have a revolutionary on the call today on today's
Yes.
Catholic Chai episode. So, Camille, once again, welcome to you. And yeah, it's not okay. We're not going to go like first question, second question. No, we don't want to do that format, but rather, we'd like to just engage in a very, normal casual discussion here. So I was just telling Neil before the show started, before welcoming you, Kamil, that, I asked him what contraception was, and he was like, no, I think Kamil better answer that. But I was like, you know what, Neil, it's very simply put, it's preventing pregnancy, But I think, Kamil, there is a lot more maybe to contraception. So if you can just tell us, what is contraception?
Sure. So the word literally means against conception. So any device or drug or method that would interact to prevent pregnancy from occurring during the sexual act, that would be an act of contraception. So it would include condoms, but it would also include the pill, foams, jellies, withdrawal, any of those kinds of techniques, the morning after pill, the IUD, that would prevent conception from happening in the act of sex. That would be contraception.
Okay. So, Kamil, I think another question that is, we heard that there are a lot of forms of contraception. I mean, there are pills, there are condoms, are all of them equally wrong, or is there a difference in all of that?
Well, there is a difference. In the ones I've mentioned, there really is not a difference, except that some can actually act as abortifacients, meaning that some of those methods can cause abortions, which would make them even more morally illicit than strict contraceptives. But there are other methods of preventing pregnancy that don't interfere with the sexual act itself. These methods are called natural family planning. And those are not troublesome as long as they are respecting the dignity of the sexual act. So, and we could talk about that a little bit later, but probably the most important thing to talk about before we talk about why contraception is wrong is to understand what it is that the church actually teaches about your sexuality that makes contraception bad for you in the first place. Because if you don't understand that, then nothing the church says about contraception is going to make any sense. And you're just going to look at it and say, well, why? Why would you do that? Why would you believe anything the church is teaching? It's ridiculous and it's old-fashioned and it's not relevant to my life. And actually, the church's teaching on contraception is relevant to your life. It's all about who you are and how you're made and what's important for the dignity of your body. So that's kind of probably the bottom ground we should talk about first.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool, Kamil. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I will summarize this in just one little pocket. There's all kinds of things that your audience can read, and I've given you some links you can put up, you can post as well. Evangelium Vitae would be a very good place to start, and other church writings. So those are good. I'm going to kind of summarize it to make it simple. You are made in God's image. That's who you are. You're not like a rock. You're not like an animal. You're not like a bug, right? Your dignity doesn't come from just simply your body. Your dignity also comes from your soul. You're made to be like God. Well, who is God, right? God is love. What does that mean? Well, God's essence is love. God isn't just some being out there who can love, right? He is love. Love is his very nature. Everything that love is, that's who he is. And so when God says you are made in my image, what he means is you are made to be like me, right? You are made to love the way I love. And here's where it gets really juicy, right? What does it mean to love the way God loves? Well, there are 4 different characteristics that we can see in Scripture and in Jesus Christ's life and in testimony about God and revelation about God. There are 4 different characteristics of what his love is like, okay? We can call, the church calls these the 4 marks of God's love. And these are important because these marks help us to understand how we imitate God in everything from our day-to-day interactions with people to how we engage in the sexual union between a man and a wife. So mark number 1, God's love is unitive, okay? And that means God unites what he creates to himself. Unitive comes from Latin uni, which means one, right? God is one in his essence. He's 3 persons, but he's one God. And so he completely unites himself to himself, right? So all 3 persons totally pour themselves out to the other. They don't say, okay, the Father doesn't say, okay, Son, I'll give you some of myself, but not all of myself because I'm powerful and you can't have all of that, right? He says, no, I pour all of myself to you. And the Son says, I pour all of myself back to you. And the Holy Spirit says, I am that love between the 2 of you, poured out between you, and I pour myself out to you and accept your love in return. That's the mystical union of God, Okay, we're meant to imitate that. And when we don't love. And when we don't love, we're unhappy and bad things happen. Okay, that's number one. Number two, God's love is more than unitive. Okay, God's love is creative, which means that God always intends to build up, make more, create. He never destroys his creation, right? God builds up his creation. Number three, God's love is eternal. It lasts forever. It will never end. And fourth, God's love is faithful, meaning that it will never betray you. It will only do what is good for you. Okay, it will always lift up, always be creative, be eternal. So it is faithful. It does not betray. It does not turn its back. All right, if that's the 4 marks of God's love, then we're intended to love like God loves. The sexual act for human beings is very different from the sexual act for animals. Okay? Because when we enter into a sexual act, we hold within us the power to help God create another human being who has the ability to love the way God loves, entering into those 4 marks. That's huge, right? A dog can't love that way, right? A bug cannot love that way. A chimpanzee cannot love like that. But you can, and you hold within you the power to work with God to bring another human being who can love like that for all eternity into the world through the sexual act. That makes the sexual act profoundly more dignified and more sacred in itself than the sexual act between animals. Now that's key. So here's the lowdown then on contraception. Okay? The problem with contraception is not that, it's too much and the church doesn't want you to enjoy things that are just too much for you, it's too good for you. The problem with contraception is that it's not enough. Okay? It's not enough. Contraception prevents you from participating in the sexual act in those 4 ways of love. So first of all, it is not unitive. When you have a condom or the pill or the IUD or something else, you're not completely uniting yourself to the other, right? You're basically telling a lie in your body. The language of your body, right, in the sexual act is meant to mirror those 4 marks. And you're saying, I will not unite my creative aspect to you. I will not unite my fertility with you. Okay, I'm going to prevent that from being part of this act itself. We're going to engage in part of the act, but not all of the act. Okay. Now, some people say, well, wait a minute. Well, then am I not allowed to have sex then when the woman is not fertile? Or if the husband is not able to conceive, or if they're both over the age of 65, maybe, and cannot conceive anymore, or 55 for some people, or 50 even for some, when the couple is no longer able to have children. No, you are still allowed, it's still fine to have sex, because in that instance, you're not doing anything to prevent the sexual act from having its total unitive purpose, right? It's nature, it's biology, it's the way your body is created that's interfering with it, okay? But you're not making a choice to introduce something that will prevent the unitive action from happening. So that's number 1. Number 2, creative, okay? Contraception's whole purpose is that you do not create new human life. So it completely acts against the creative aspect of God's love. You're trying to thwart that possibility through the different mechanisms. And there are different ways that contraception work. We can talk about that later, but it prevents that creative aspect. Third, eternal. This one's really important. Because sex is so powerful that it has the capacity to bring new people into the world, when you engage in the sexual act, God asks us to make an eternal commitment to the other. And in the human sense, right, by eternal, you're not married in heaven, but in the eternal sense, we mean until death do you part. And contraception allows people to have a huge reason not to let sex be forever, right? It opens the door to infidelity, adultery, promiscuity, right? Sex outside of marriage, because I don't have to be committed to you because there's no possibility that a baby's going to come out. Supposedly, right? There is obviously failure with contraception, some methods more than others. But it tricks us into thinking, oh, I don't have to have a commitment. I'm free, right? I'm free to do whatever I want with my body. I don't have to stick around. And so you can see statistically, people who contracept have far greater numbers of sexual partners. And they are a lot less deep, a lot more shallow. And there's a lot more adultery and infidelity in marriages where contraception is used. And then the 4th mark, faithful, right? That's right there, the faithful mark. The betrayal of the other because now you are just a body that I can have sex with, right? It's just for pleasure, and I can betray you and have sex with somebody else because there's no possibility of a baby. So the faithful aspect is gone with contraception. So that's the fundamental theological reason why contraception is wrong, because it is beneath our dignity and it doesn't allow us to love the way God loves.
Yes, Kamala. So I think we'll just look at this a little more practically right now. I think you were taking it in a theological aspect. So what if I think most of the arguments nowadays are, what if there is a consent? There is consent between the man and the woman. The woman also agrees for it, and the man also agrees for it, and they decide to have sex using a contraceptive.
Sure. Well,
in that case, isn't it a little more debatable? And also another thing adding on to that, we also know that women are more aroused during the ovulation days. So isn't it good if they actually have sex during that time and prevent the pregnancy?
Well, I'll answer that last question first. Yes, it's good that people have sex during the time that the woman is ovulating. God made it that way so that you'll have babies. Babies are a good thing. They're not a bad thing. And that's his design for it. Okay. But I'll get back to that in a moment. Handle that first question. What if I were to say to you, well, what if the husband and wife both consent to robbing a bank? Then is it okay? Because they have both consented. Yeah, but robbing a bank is intrinsically wrong, and it will hurt you, and it hurts others, and it hurts your relationship with God. So consent has nothing to do with the morality of the act here, right? Contraception is wrong. Just like if you say, well, what if the man and the woman both consent to adultery? Then is it okay, right? No, the sexual act isn't made okay just by consent of the people, right? Because it's meant for something deeper than that, and it has to include the intent of the act, not just the consent of the act. Okay, so there's that. But go back for a minute to the question about sexual pleasure during ovulating times. You know, I'm not going to get graphic and into detail here, but I've been married for a number of years, and I can tell you that there is pleasure in sex even when you are not ovulating. So this whole idea that without the ovulating time, you're going to be missing out on something, and you know your life is not going to be deep, and you'll never have experienced true sex. It's a lie. Especially for a woman, the sexual experience is not so much in the physical. It is there too. The physical is important, but it's not so much in the physical as it is in the embrace with her husband, right? Women are looking for the connection, the empathy, the gift of self, right? The deep understanding, right? The security of the man. That's what she's looking for. And that's what turns us on. And if a man is tricking himself into thinking that all she's looking for is a physical high, he doesn't understand women. And if a woman thinks that's all she really needs to be happy, she doesn't understand herself, right? So first of all, I just think that's a complete lie. Secondly, and this is more important, life is about giving yourself to others. It's not about taking. And so if I'm only saying, well, then I'm not going to obey the church's law on sex because I won't be able to have all the pleasure that I want to have, what does that sound like? Does that sound like the unitive aspect of God's love? Does that sound like the Trinity? Or does that sound like Satan? Right? To me, it sounds very selfish, right? And I think that's what the church's point is. Yeah, sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices, even in marriage, even in sex, right? That's not a bad thing. To say, I don't want to have children, so we have to abstain from sex during the time that I'm most fertile, and that's when it's most physically pleasing. I give that to you as a gift, God. That's so much more powerful than what our opposition teaches us. It's all about you. It's all about pleasure. Do whatever you want. You're not like God. Forget about God. He doesn't even care. And those are the relationships that end up broken, and those are the hearts that end up broken.
Thank you, Camille. I mean, that was a lot more information than what I read on. But, you know, we've been focusing on, let's say, the man and the woman, the husband and the wife. But I would like to focus on the baby, the potential baby for a moment here. So let's just say there is a man and a woman, and they got married, and I don't know, they might have met with unfortunate events, and they are not in I don't know, the man might have lost his job, you know, and they might not be in a position to take care of, let's just say, if at all a newborn is going to come along, they're not in a position to take care of the baby. So I mean, understanding the unitive, the creative, the eternal, the faithful, but focusing on the creative aspect of the love over here. I mean, don't you think contraception is, let's just say these two are faithful Catholics and they really want to, have that beautiful married life, and they really want to raise their kid like to the best of their ability. So what's wrong in using contraception to postpone that creation? I mean, they're not going against the creative aspect, but they just, I don't know, the contraception they're just using so that because they might, get into better times. So yeah.
Sure. So the church does not teach that you cannot, that you cannot avoid having children. The church is not teaching that is sinful, to avoid having children in marriage, as long as you are open to the possibility that a child may come and willing to accept the responsibility if a child does come, and as long as your reasons for avoiding children is not selfish, is generous. Remember, that's the key to being a Christian. My life is about generosity. If my reasons for avoiding having a child are selfish, then it is sinful because selfishness is sinful. Okay? Now, what about, there are a lot of reasons when it would be legitimate for a husband and wife practicing in their marriage faithful, Catholic teachings to avoid having children. The man or the wife may be very, very sick. They may be very poor and worried about how they are going to provide for the children they already have. There may be war going on and there's instability, so much instability that they don't even know if the family is going to be separated by this war or something like that. Okay. So there are lots of reasons, legitimate reasons why you may have to avoid having children for a particular period of time, or even throughout the entire marriage if somebody is very, very sick, for example. Even extreme psychological illness could be another reason why as well. In those cases, the church says, yes, if you are truly considering, and you have to consider this over time, right? You can't just say, you have to make a sincere decision. You have to evaluate it again. When your circumstances change, you need to reevaluate. But yes, you can avoid having children. But then the question comes in about the method. The method of contraception doesn't now become okay because you have a good reason, right? Robbing a bank does not become okay because you have a good reason to rob the bank. Okay, it's wrong to rob a bank because it's wrong, because stealing from other people is wrong, and using a gun to do it is wrong, and threatening other people's lives is wrong. Okay, so contraception is wrong intrinsically because it, by its very nature, disorders the sexual act. Okay, you engage in sex, but you're removing those things from it. So what the church teaches is what you should and can do in those instances is practice natural family planning. This is where you avoid having sex during the time that the woman is in her infertile period, when she is not fertile. So there's about 3 days when the woman is very, very fertile, and 7-day period when she is, going through the ovulation. And during those 6 or 7 days is when you would avoid sexual activity entirely as a way to avoid having children. Now, is that unfair? Well, there are 30, sometimes 31 days in a month, right? So to avoid sex during those, sometimes it's 5, 6, 7, it depends on the woman's body, during that period of time, in order to avoid having children, is not really that much of a sacrifice. And for what sacrifice it is, what a beautiful gift to give to your husband, to your wife, that I respect your body so much, and I respect your relationship with God so much, that I will not have sex with you during this time because of our extreme circumstances, and will offer it as a gift to God. Okay? So natural family planning is very, very common now among practicing Catholics. Very, very good for you in many ways, right? It doesn't, first of all, when you use contraception, foams and pills and jellies and rubber in the sexual act, yuck, right? I mean, blah. It's just like, what is that, right? Natural family planning gets rid of all of that. And it's just you and your spouse and nothing between us, except for that period of time when we invite God in because we are going to refrain. And nothing's come between us during that time when we're not having sex. It's still us, totally pouring ourselves out to each other in an act of faithfulness. Okay? So it gets rid of all that. Secondly, natural family planning doesn't have any of the complications of contraception. The pill is very dangerous for women. if you open up the little insert in the contraceptive pill, it's a little piece of paper. It opens up to about this big with teeny tiny writing on it, because there are hundreds, literally hundreds of contraindications to the pill. The reasons why you shouldn't be taking it. If you're diabetic, if you're overweight, if you have this problem, if you have that problem, the pill can cause all sorts of harms to a woman, right? We know it can cause acne, but more than that, it can cause deep vein thrombosis. It can cause embolisms. It can cause heart attack. It can cause stroke. It can cause cancer. It can cause severe depression. Suicidal tendencies have been, linked to it. Breast cancer has been linked to it. So natural family planning gets rid of all that. You don't have any of that, those problems, the weight gain, the bloating, right? The feelings, the emotional feelings that come along with the pill. All gone with natural family planning. So then people say, oh, well, natural family planning doesn't work, right? In the olden days, they used to say people who practice natural family planning are called parents because you're going to have a kid because it doesn't work. That's not true anymore. NFP is very sophisticated now, very easy to learn. There are different methods depending on what you prefer to do. There's little machines that are inexpensive where you test during the fertile times of your period, so that you make sure that you know when that fertile time is. There's other methods to look at the mucus and look at your body temperature. There are methods that you can learn that are inexpensive. And in my opinion, every parish should be teaching natural family planning. Every diocese should be teaching natural family planning to their couples. We learned it. We went through the class, and we actually used it two ways. First, when we got married, we were older. And so I needed to sort of move in psychologically to this idea I was going to have children. So we used it for about a year to avoid having children. And then we used it to have children, because it works in reverse, right? We knew exactly when our fertile days were. And we achieved pregnancy twice, even though I was well into my 40s. So it was just fantastic. It's highly successful. It's about 99% successful as a contraceptive, as avoiding pregnancy. And then can be very successful in achieving pregnancy as well.
Yes, Kamil. I think we'll slowly move into something else. We were talking about childbearing and getting pregnant. Now, let's take the scenario of where a man or the woman might be HIV positive. So in that case, I have heard that using a contraception actually helps us to prevent the HIV from transmitting to the other person. So is it actually okay, or isn't it a little cruel to say that you cannot use a contraceptive in such a situation?
No, I would never use the word cruel, because true cruelty is causing somebody to misunderstand their relationship with God, to not understand what their body is about, and to lose heaven because they are practicing things that are contrary to God's teachings. That, I think, is the greatest cruelty, is to cause somebody to walk into the way of Satan rather than to the way and the light of truth and the way of God. So I don't think it's cruel. Even in the case of HIV/AIDS, if the couple that is, sexually active, if they are childbearing age and a child could result from the sexual act, you still cannot do anything to separate that sexual act from its unitive, creative, eternal, or faithful aspect, because you are still called to live in the image and likeness of God. To me, it is cruel to say to that person who has HIV/AIDS, oh, you don't have to live in the image of God because you have AIDS. So you don't have to sacrifice and suffer and give gifts to God because you're exempt. Why would you do that? In that case, I think that person has an even greater dignity and an even greater calling than I do, because their sacrifice may have to be total. But the couple may also accept the risk, of HIV/AIDS transmission in order to achieve conception. That's something that they would have to discern together, and discern whether the risk is worth, the conceiving of the child that they wish to have. And they need to talk to their pastor about that, their spiritual advisor, and their doctor as well.
Yes.
So, Kamil, so would I be right if I were to say that the only way for a Catholic couple to be faithful to the teachings of the Church on human sexuality is to adopt the NFP method, the natural family planning method? I mean, if that statement were true, I mean, don't you think it's a little too rigid there? I mean, there is, in a world filled with options and alternatives, the church just gives me NFP. You can just do NFP. The church just gives me one option. And even in the world of contraception, I mean, the number of the different types of contraceptives, I think there are some 8 to 10 different kinds of methods or types of contraception. So what about that?
Again, Johnny, that's a very good question. Again, Johnny, I would ask you, isn't it unfair of the church to tell me that I cannot murder my neighbor whom I hate, right? Especially considering that there are 8 to 10, no, 15, no, 20 different ways I can kill my neighbor. And so the world gives me all these options. There are guns and knives and ropes and, hacksaws and, all these options, but the church gives me one: thou shalt not kill. The church is so cruel. No, and besides, you don't have only one option with the church teaching. There are many options. You can stay single. You can become a nun. You can become a priest. You can become a consecrated virgin, right? You can become a single person living in the world. If you're married, you can choose natural family planning. You cannot choose natural family planning. You don't have to choose natural family planning. My husband and I practiced it for 3 years while we were trying to conceive, and now we're done. Now we're saying, it's up to you, Lord. Right? I probably won't have a child now because I'm over the age probably, but I have friends my age who have conceived. You can say, I'm not going to do natural family planning. I'm going to let God in and let him do whatever he wants and just trust him with the size of my family. So you do have choices. But the church is saying, once you make the choice of marriage, right, commit to that choice. Be committed to the choice that you have made of how you are going to live out your fruitfulness in God's kingdom.
Yes. Yes, Kamil, I think another situation, let's look at this like something like this. It is a medical situation where your doctor is actually asking you to not conceive. In that case, and it is a young couple, maybe somebody who's in the 20s or the 30s. In that situation, what would you advise them to do in such a situation?
Your doctor is not God, first of all. So your doctor may be telling you use contraception, and you can simply look back at him and say, no. Give me another option. I'm not using contraception. It's not good for me, right? We had that instance, right? When my husband and I, after we had conceived our second child, the doctors recommended contraception for us because we were older, right? And if I have a child, it's dangerous. Well, I was 41 when I had my first child and 44 when I had my second child, and they turned out just fine. Yes, there were some dangers and complications in the first child. When I gave birth to Juliet, my uterus came out. I could have died, but I didn't. And yet, even knowing that I could have died, my husband and I were at peace because we chose God's way rather than the doctor's way, right? Now, let me just make a caveat there. I'm not saying don't listen to your doctor. Right? Your doctor has great medical knowledge. And he will know, in most cases, what is good for your body and what is not. But almost the entire medical profession has bought into the lie that contraception is good for you. And if you do the study on yourself, you will see it is not only not good for you, it is very harmful to your body, very harmful to relationships, and very harmful to your relationship with God. So what I would do if my doctor said, for your own health reasons, use contraception, I would say, would natural family planning achieve the same purpose? And if he says, well, yeah, but it doesn't work, I would say, well, that's your opinion, right? Because it actually does work. And if your viewers want help in knowing how to practice natural family planning, all they have to do is Google it. NFP, natural family planning. There's the Billings method. There's the symptothermal method, right? There's the little clear blue machine you can purchase online at Amazon. So there's all kinds of different ways you can do it, and you can learn it online. You don't necessarily need to take a class at your parish or your church. You can learn it online.
You spoke about Google, Kamil, right now. So yeah, that's obviously, I think, pretty much everybody's primary source of information, especially right now because we are all at home and COVID keeps us in our home. So even me, when I was reading up on this topic, and there were so many well-renowned medical articles, journals, newsletters, all of them advocating these are the benefits of contraception. It kind of helps you sort of regulate, all this and that. So in this age, especially in this internet age, as a Catholic, as you mentioned, the online means, as a Catholic, where should you think that I should go looking for information from? Like, is there an authentic source, especially on, the contraception or NFP or anything of that sorts? And attached to this, I have one more ask of you, Camille. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about, your what you found, in through the process of healing our culture, that particular initiative of, you can kind of answer.
Sure. Yes, online. If you go to, well, I don't know in India, in the United States, USCCB.org, this United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. You have your own Catholic Conference of Bishops in India, and if you go to that website, I would imagine you would have some information on NFP. But if you go to usccb.org, you will find, and you type in contraception, you will find a whole bunch of articles that explain deeper and answer all the questions. There's the question on rape, which we haven't brought up yet, which I don't know if we have time to discuss that, but you can go to there. And it also has links to the Vatican. If you go to the Vatican website, they have all the encyclicals and articles and Pope's letters on contraception that you can read. Some of them are very complicated, but most of them are very simple to understand about why the church teaches what she does, and all the other issues, all these other bioethical issues, like, well, what about cloning and stem cell research? And, all the sexual issues are covered in those encyclicals in very simple to understand ways. Another resource would be One More Soul. If you Google that, I'm not sure if it's onemoresoul.org or what, but One More Soul has a whole lot of information also on natural family planning and contraception. And there are others as well, but that will get you started.
Okay.
About healing our culture.
Oh, Healing the Culture. Yeah. So that's the organization that I run, called Healing the Culture, is a very unique way of teaching about pro-life and why the church is pro-life, against abortion. And it includes the idea that you are meant to be happy, and happiness goes beyond physical pleasure and your own ego satisfaction. But true happiness is about gift of self and surrender to God. And so we talk much more about happiness and success and quality of life and love and freedom and what suffering is for than we do about the practical issues of abortion, in order to convince young people, college students and high school students, why they should be pro-life. And we show how making abortion legal really leads to very narrow and unsophisticated definitions of happiness and freedom and love and rights. And people can go to healingtheculture.com. We have a page called Learn, and you go under there, and there's a bunch of free articles and videos where you can hear more about, the abortion issue specifically.
I think that's a perfect source of information. So folks, for all Catholics out there, pretty much everybody out there, if you want to know more, that's the page you can check out, along with the other links that Camille said. So thank you for sharing that, Camille.
Sure.
So I think we'll quickly go into the audience questions right now. We have a lot of questions coming in. So here we go. The first question. Okay, the first question is from the handle called Darksider. What about Pope Francis saying sex is an essential as food? Are there not people who eat food for the act of tasting the different flavors? Why can't people do the same with sex?
Well, I'll handle that part of the question. Are there not people who eat food for the act of tasting the different flavors? Sure, there are. And, you can certainly, when I am engaging in the sexual act with my husband, I am tasting the different flavors of sex in the way of getting to know him physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, right? And through the body, through the language of the body. And those are the flavors of sex, right? If you're implying that the tasting of sex is as many partners as you can have, right? There are some practices of sex that are poisonous for you, for your soul. Right? And that would be like saying, sure, you can taste all the different kind of foods you want, but some are really bad for you and can kill you, right? So we know that we should avoid certain foods. If you're diabetic, you should avoid certain foods. And there are certain things that you don't eat in the natural world because they will poison you and kill you, no matter who you are. It's the same thing with sex. There are rules to sex, right? And they're not my rules. They're not the church's rules. They're not the Pope's rules. The Pope didn't make these rules up. They're the laws of God. And when we violate them, we get hurt. The purpose of the church is to help you not hurt your soul. That's what she's teaching you. Yeah. So there are some flavors you definitely want to avoid. they're bad for you.
Okay.
So-
So Amulya has a question with respect to the fourth mark of love, faithful. Having a baby does not ensure the couple remains faithful, especially in the case of the man being faithful to the woman. I'm not
Yes.
really sure if there's a question, but
Yeah, well, it's a point, and it's a good point,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's absolutely true. Not using contraception is not your safeguard against infidelity, right? It's just that using contraception is one of the predictors that infidelity is easier to happen. It's much easier for that to happen in a relationship where contraception is used. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's lots of other reasons why people are unfaithful. And so that's exactly why we need God, isn't it? It's why we need the church. It's why we need prayer. It's why we need God. Human beings are fallen. You're absolutely right. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Akhil. Will more offsprings lead to degeneration of resources?
I don't see that happening. I really don't. When we went to India, we spent a month in India, and Indians have done a remarkable job accommodating almost 1 billion people with resources, right? You've got the church that has stepped in where the government has not. You have the government stepping in where it's essential and critical. You have families and neighbors stepping in. And you have so much land, right? People who say, oh, India is overpopulated. I was there, right? You're there. I look at all the land and all the fertile land you have for expanding. The problem, the problem is some areas is there's just too much people living on top of each other. When there's so much more room for development and expansion. I just don't see that happening. You can read there's something called the overpopulation myth online. You can watch the videos online. Go into YouTube and look up overpopulation myth. There's another one, but I can't remember what it was called. I'll have to get that to you later. But these videos really do a great job of documenting with research and resources how this idea that we're going to become overpopulated, there won't be enough food for everyone, we're all going to die, we'll have to live on another planet. They're just completely not true. God has enough land here for everyone, and you could fit everybody on the planet on a very small area of land and still have enough resources for everyone. The problem is usually governments in some countries that want to control the population, and so they put them into smaller areas of land as a method of controlling. That's bad. But the problem is not that there's not enough resources. Human beings are amazing. We come up with all kinds of new ways to provide resources for people. Hydroponic farming is one of them, where you can actually farm underwater if there's not enough space on land to do the farming. That's just one example.
Yes. So the next question, can we have?
So we have a question by Mufasa. You mentioned something about the use of contraceptives with regard to rape. Is it allowed then to use the pill?
Yeah, there's an if, okay, an if in this question. If medical science can produce a contraceptive that would only act in a contraceptive way, then in a case of rape, then that would be allowed by the church. So in other words, there are 3 different ways that the pill, today they use what they call emergency contraception, or the morning after pill, right? Which is supposedly going to prevent conception, if you've had sex and it was unprotected. And there's a variation of these chemicals, these pills that they use when a woman has been raped and presents herself to the hospital. Now, obviously, this was, number one, a non-consenting act. There were not one of the 4 marks of God's love was exercised here, and it was exercised without her consent. So you're missing the most important thing. There was no unitive at all, right? The couple were not uniting themselves to each other. There was no creative intended in this. There was no faithful, certainly was not faithful, and it certainly was not eternal. There was no promise till death do we part. So there is nothing in this act that mirrored those 4 marks, and it was without her consent, and it was a violent act. So the church says in that case, in a true rape, certainly she can go and try to avoid the pregnancy, the fertilization of the sperm and the egg. But they usually will use the chemical in the pill, and the problem is that it acts in 3 ways. First, the pill will prevent ovulation by blocking the message from the brain to ovulate. Second, it will thicken the mucus in the cervix so that the sperm has a hard time traveling. It's much more difficult to travel to the egg. It gets blocked. But the third mechanism is that it makes the lining of the woman's uterus, her womb, the lining in it, very thin, and it shrivels and it sloughs off very easily, and it becomes inhospitable to a new child. So if there is breakthrough ovulation with the pill, which happens, or if she happens to have ovulated during the time, before she took the emergency contraception, and so there's not enough time to stop the ovulation, and if the cervical mucus thickening does not work, and that probably would not work in many of these instances because there isn't time by the time she goes to the hospital, then the mechanism of the thinning of the uterus is what you're counting on. That if she does conceive, the baby won't be able to implant and the baby will starve. Basically, that's what happens to the tiny new human, is he starves to death because he cannot implant in the uterus, and he gets sloughed out as if it were a period. It will mimic a period. And so the church says you cannot use an emergency contraceptive if that's a possibility. And to my knowledge, there are no treatments that don't have that as a great risk. I'm not aware of a chemical intervention that does not have that third mechanism, the abortifacient mechanism, as a risk. And that would make it wrong, because you can't risk killing a human being. Yeah.
Yes, got it. Yes. So the next question is from Justin. According to the church, you're not supposed to do anything unethical or harm to anyone else. Now, when a couple is older, then the risk of having children having Down syndrome is very high. So this is wrong. I think that's again a statement.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I would first challenge you on saying that children with Down syndrome are wrong. I once debated against an abortionist who told me that children with Down syndrome were a failure of nature. And I think that we have to question whether the real failure of nature is our failure to love. Right? Children with Down syndrome have a physical disability, but they have an immense capacity to love. I know several of them. One of them is named Eric Matthews, and he starred in one of our video productions. He's a young man now. And he has incredible love. And he testified in front of Congress in the United States one day to challenge people on their notion of people with Down syndrome being a failure or being wrong, or for it being wrong for couples to produce children with Down syndrome. He said, "My ability to love exceeds the ability of those who would kill us." And I think there's something in that. I mean, you've got to listen to that and say, why are we assuming that because someone is disabled, they have no right to life, when they have the capacity to mimic God's 4 marks of love? We're afraid of suffering. We don't want to bring suffering into the world. And there will be some suffering with Down syndrome, but not if we walk the walk with the person with Down syndrome. They end up being most children with Down syndrome I've ever met are happier, far happier, than non-Down syndrome people. Not only that, but I'll also tell you this. I was warned not to have children and to abort my first child because we were given a test and she tested positive for Down syndrome. And my husband and I discerned, if she has Down syndrome, she has Down syndrome. She already is here. She's not a maybe might happen person. She's an already here person with Down syndrome. So then the question is, are we going to kill her or not? Well, obviously we're not going to kill her. And when you say, a couple might have a child with Down syndrome, yes, the odds go up when you get older, but my child was born without Down syndrome. So testing can be wrong. So I would say using contraception to avoid a child with Down syndrome is probably not legitimate, because children with Down syndrome have just as much a right to be here as anyone else. And their lives are valuable. And I think we lose something big in God's love when we exclude them, when we exclude their possibility of existence.
Yes. I think I remember seeing that particular video which you mentioned about the person having Down syndrome.
Me too.
It was very beautiful.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
It was really amazing. Yeah.
Yes. So can we go to the next question?
You have a question by Tony Thomas. Can we use MTP if the child has some anomaly as seen during antenatal ultrasound? If we haven't used, then it will be sorrowful to the father and the mother that their child is physically challenged.
I don't know what MTP is. Can we use MTP if the child has some anomaly? Well, if the child already exists, here in the question, I think we're assuming that the baby already exists. This isn't about preventing the conception of the baby, but the baby's already there and has an anomaly. And in that case, I'm wondering if the question is whether or not you can abort the child. And morally, you cannot, because the child has its own unique dignity and is made in the image of God and has a natural right to life. And so we're called to protect that child, even if that child is only going to live a short time, right? We don't choose the value of someone's life based on how long you're going to live. The value of your life is immeasurable because you're made in God's image. Even if you can't exercise that because you're too young, you are still meant to be an image of God's love for us. And so we are called to protect that.
Yeah, Kamil, I think MTP was medical termination of pregnancy. Yeah, just adding on that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Abortion.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Next question. Yeah. Okay, the next question is from Mufasa again. Won't the NFP method lead the husband to go searching for pleasure elsewhere and lead to extramarital affairs because he can't have what he wants from his wife when he wants?
I would ask your beloved that question, if you're a woman, before you marry him. Because if that's his attitude, he doesn't deserve to be a husband. I don't know that I could say much more about that.
That was mic drop. That was a mic drop, Camille. So
Yes.
And I don't mean to belittle that, because there are women who are stuck in marriages where the husband is like that. And again, I would say, don't allow your husband to use you as a sexual object and a thing by putting poisons into your body or allowing a rubber latex between you, because he's so selfish that he will tell you that if you don't, he's going to someone else. Turn that around on him and say, the problem is not me. The problem is you. You don't understand how good you are and how beautiful you are and how wonderful this relationship of marriage could be, right? If we could join together in our search for God instead of you thinking you can find him elsewhere, right?
Yes.
And they have to be strong and challenge him, as women often do.
Yes, definitely. So next question.
by Giles George Matthew. Why does church allow NFP method but not condom, while statistically the chance of being pregnant with NFP is 0.4%, is less than that of using a condom, which is 2%?
Oh, wait, the chance of being pregnant with a condom is 2%. But the chance of being pregnant with NFP is 0.4%. That's less than the condom usage in your statistics. I don't know where you got those statistics from, but by the statistics here, the chance of becoming pregnant with natural family planning, 0.4% is less than 2%. So I don't know if you made a mistake there or what.
Yeah,
but,
I think
but
that those numbers don't stack up, do they? Kimmy?
They don't. But even if there was a mistake and it was 4% and 2%, it wouldn't make a difference. It's not about the effectiveness is not what the church is saying is making it good or bad for you. Okay, it's the mechanism itself. It's the way it works itself that interferes with your relationship with God. So even if NFP if it was 100% failure and it doesn't work at all, okay, well, you still can't use contraception and live the moral life of Christ because it's contrary to the love of Christ.
Yeah. So it's from the same person, Jael. Is having sex during infertile time with NFP method not aligning with Catholic teaching of fruitfulness? Is having sex with condoms same as having sex during infertile time?
A good question. So no, he's having, could you put the question back up real quick? So is having sex during the infertile time when you're not fertile, doesn't that mean that you're not being fruitful? That's what the first part of the question is asking. And no, because you're simply refraining from the act, right? I'm not having sex right now. So am I not engaging in the call to be fruitful? Of course not. You don't have to engage in sex all the time, right? So what you're doing is you're saying, I am just not engaging in an activity, but when I am engaging in that activity, I'm not removing the fruitfulness from it. So it's two very different things. And then he asks, is having sex with a condom the same as having sex during the infertile time? Well, I mean, if you're having sex with a condom during the infertile time, then yes. But if you're having sex with a condom during the fertile time, it's not the same because you have rendered the act infertile. See, what's happening is you have done something to the act yourself physically to make it be infertile. Whereas with natural family planning, you have not interfered with the integrity of the sexual act. You haven't done anything to render it infertile. You're just not practicing it. You're choosing not to use the gift right now. And that's okay to do. You can say to God, I love your act of sex making. I'm not going to practice it right now because to do so would put my life in danger or my family in danger or the emotional health of my wife in danger. And God respects that. He just doesn't want you to interfere with the integrity of the lovemaking act.
Okay. Yes.
So, Camille, a question by Annie. I think, I think it's this is the question. How can, how can married couples practice NFP if the wife has irregular cycles, which is quite common?
Yes. So NFP used to be called the rhythm method, which was not very effective, maybe 70 to 80% effective because of that reason. Because if a woman has irregular cycles, she can't properly chart it, and then you're going to have ovulation and she's going to have sex during that period. Today, that doesn't happen. The methods today take into account your irregular cycles. And so it's not looking at the cycle itself, it's looking at each day in the cycle. And so you do have to become very observant about what your body is doing all the time. But what's so bad about that? Right? That's actually a good thing to know what your body is doing and why. Because women who practice NFP have far greater episodes of discovering cancer earlier, uterine cancers and cervical cancers, because they know what's going on in their body and they can detect when something is really weird. And so they get treatment earlier. Or I guess the answer is no. It's still very effective, even with irregular cycles, because you're looking at every day what's happening. And when you have an irregular cycle, you can tell, you know that. And so you can still tell when that period of time is that you're fertile.
Okay, so now we have the next question. Next question is from Akhil. How to meet expenses of family while having more offspring?
that goes maybe a little bit beyond my pedigree here. It's a good question, and it's a fair question. When you have more children, it's going to cost more. But I also know that you have mechanisms in India to help when you have more children than you can provide for. And the Catholic Church is a huge source of help in India, right? You have a tremendous assistance through groups like Jesus Youth. Jesus Youth has stepped in amazing ways to provide for families who have need, who cannot provide for themselves. And rely on your neighbors and your friends and your family. And I would also ask this question. Sometimes we think we need more than we really do, right? Especially here in the United States. In the US, we especially do not have the argument that I can't provide for my children. You certainly can here. And I think more and more couples in India as well can provide. It's not a question of whether or not I'll be able to feed my children and they'll starve to death. It's more a question of, oh, I really want this kind of a house, or, oh, I really wanted another car, or, oh, I really wanted that thing, or, oh, we have to give up this. You have to question whether your motivations are selfish. And if they're not selfish, which often they are not, there are mechanisms in the church and society that can help. So I would say you turn to them. Don't turn to contraception. Turn to your community and turn to your church and turn to Jesus Youth.
Yes, definitely.
Well, Camille, so I have something personal there. I mean, when I say personal, I have actually, friends, or, I've visited families and houses where, there were sort of, 4, 5, 6, maybe more than that children. There were children there in that house. And, as we were speaking and as we were talking, obviously, I think in one of those house visits, one of those obvious questions came up. I mean, so many children, how do you provide for them? And always those stories, sort of, in a way, align, wherein each one of those parents would say that somehow as each child came along and as they welcomed each child into this world, somehow, I don't know, there was a miraculous promotion. There was an increase in wealth, or there was an increase in abundance. They sometimes they can't even explain the origin, the source. It was so unpredictable. But it was just so amazing to see that God gives you something, and he's not going to give you anything without giving you the means to provide for it, basically, So it's just not the baby that comes, but with the baby, I think God in all his goodness and knowledge is going to give the parents the means of taking care of that child as well.
And we have to keep our eyes open to look for those means as well. God wants us to cooperate. He's not just going to have you wake up and magically there's a table of food all around you, right? God wants us to look for those opportunities. And how many times are we refusing the opportunities that could have provided for our own welfare but we refused God's gifts because we were afraid of them, or we didn't look, or we didn't use our intelligence, right? Or we had some selfish reason why. We have to be open to participating in his generosity. But you are right. God has promised us he will not give us anything that we cannot endure. And you can be assured of that. Faith assures us of that.
Yes. Okay. The next
And
question.
remember also that, a large family could be a reason to practice NFP. Right? You have too many children. That is possible that you would have so many children you can't provide. In that case, you may want to look at natural family planning to avoid.
But there's one thing, Camille, one absolutely common thing in all of those families that I might have seen, or even in pictures, is that there is that one thing that money can't buy, and that is pure joy.
Yes.
I mean, the joy in those families, yeah.
The most joyful families I know are the ones who have 9, 10 children. And I know a family who's expecting their 11th now. And, they can provide. They're doing okay. It's difficult. But boy, you go to their house, you don't want to leave.
I mean, you have your own football team. I mean, you're practically a manager. So, I would be happy. So, yeah.
Yes.
So I think we have another question
I
in
grew
the
up in a
audience.
family of 6. There were 6 of us. And we've
Okay.
survived in a very, very small. My father had a tiny, and my mother didn't work, and my father had a tiny income, and we had joy, a lot of joy.
It's still reflecting in your comment. So we have another question, but I think the audience, we have more questions. So another question by Prashant: isn't using contraception better than committing abortion?
Well.
So we have an add-on to there as well, Camille. Using contraception does not kill anyone as in abortion. So hence, isn't contraception better than abortion?
If you're using a condom, that would be true. If you're using another method like withdrawal, that would be true. But in chemical abortion, in chemical contraception, there's always the risk that it is using an abortifacient mechanism. And so abortion is a real risk with most contraceptives because most people are using some form of chemical as well. But preventing a pregnancy has a very serious moral defect to it. Murdering a person also has a very serious moral defect to it. And both of them, when they're practiced with full consent and full knowledge, can be very serious sins. And so I don't know that I would want to say, well, which one is a better sin when they are both very serious sins because they separate us from God in a profound way, both of them by negating the creative aspect of God's love. So I don't think I would want to say, oh, well, contraceptive at least is not as bad of a sin. They're both extremely serious wrongs and can be sinful if you're practicing them with full intent. And that's another thing. Some people may be watching this and say, I didn't know contraception was wrong. And does that mean I have a mortal sin? If you truly didn't know it was wrong, if your church, somebody in your church has been telling you it's fine and everybody's doing it and it's just expected of you and you never knew, whether or not you've committed a sin is doubtful. You have to talk to your priest about that. But it still is wrong, right? Something can be wrong and not sinful because you didn't know, right? So you didn't actually commit a sin because you didn't know. But now that you do know, right, then you need to avoid the actions that are harmful.
There was no full knowledge, so which is one of the conditions.
Yes, you
for
have to
an
have
act to be a
knowledge
sin.
and consent.
So, yes.
Knowledge and consent is what makes something sinful.
Yes. So the next question is from Manny Sebastian. A lot of married couples after having 2 children decide mutually that the wife would remove her uterus to stop further pregnancy. What does the church says about this, and is this a sin?
Yes, mutilating your body for any purpose other than to save your body or to prevent some serious health problem would be wrong. Your body is made with integrity for a purpose, and that life-giving capacity was made for a reason. So to remove your uterus is a self-mutilation without the purpose of preventing your own death. Right? It's being done for a reason that would be selfish, because you can avoid having children if you have a good reason in other methods that don't involve the mutilation of your body. The only way that you could mutilate your body, remove your uterus, right, or remove some other part of your body, is if leaving it there is going to cause you death or severe bodily injury. There's a cancer, a cervical cancer, uterine cancer, where you have to remove the uterus. In that case, Yes, you must remove the uterus if you have cancer and you're going to die. You don't have to say, but it's a sin. The church said sterilization is wrong and I won't be able to have babies anymore. In that case, you need to protect your own body from death. And so removing your uterus would be allowed.
Okay.
Next question by Justin. Having sex for pleasure is not only in humans, but also in some animals. After all, we evolved from animals. So how can having sex for pleasure be wrong, provided there is consent by both parties?
Because you're not an animal. Okay. We may. So if you look at the evolution and you see that there's evidence that human beings have evolved from animals. Fine, whichever way it ends up being, I don't know. I'm sure when we die, we'll figure out truly how we actually got here and in what way, and all of those mysteries of the world. But even if it's true, that we evolved from animals, there's something different about us. Right? We're not an ape. We are made with an immortal soul, and we're made to image God's likeness. An ape cannot do that, and that's why we're different when we practice sex. Sex is elevated above the animals. Right? We've even been elevated above the angels. Angels cannot have sex. They cannot create new angels. Only God can create an angel. There's no co-creation, right? There's no procreation with angels. Every angel God created at the beginning of time, that's all the angels, because unless he wants to create more. But we've been elevated. And so that makes the sexual act different for us than it is for animals.
Got that, Camille. I mean, I see constant comparisons. I think, the first metaphor or comparison that we use is always animals, but I think it's a fresh perspective to think that, hold on a second, we are higher than the angels also, like God has sort of
I wouldn't say ontologically we're higher than the angels. But sex, we've been elevated above the angels in that regard, because
Absolutely.
they cannot participate with God in that way. And by the way, just as an aside, doesn't have anything to do with this, but that's, some theologians think that that's what caused Satan to rebel. Right? Because he was, number one, he was disgusted that human beings, that God would become human, because it's so beneath us spiritual beings. But secondly, because he was jealous, sickly jealous that humans would be able to participate in this creative act.
See, that's such an interesting fact. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the next question from Doris. How is withdrawal wrong?
Oh, because withdrawal, by not allowing the sexual act to complete the way God intended it to complete, right? Withdrawal is interfering in the integrity of the sexual act. So the integrity is not just leaving all the parts there, it's also completing it. Integrity includes the whole. It means you've got the whole. And if the sexual act is missing part of the whole because you withdrew before, the sperm releases, which is the natural end of the sexual act, you've disrupted its integrity. And you haven't really used it for its proper intent. The sexual act is not being used for its proper intent. Different from not having sex at all, where you're not abusing the sexual act, you're simply not participating in it at all. Now, if a husband and wife aren't having sex at all because they never want to have children because they want to live the high life and have wine and, jewels and a fancy house, well, that's not a good practice of, of avoiding sexuality as well. You have to see the full picture.
Okay. Yes. So I think we'll go to the last question.
I think we'll go to the last question because
Yes.
sort of a slow, almost come to the end of our show. So the last question. Don't worry, folks. You can still keep asking, and we will definitely get back to you with the answers. But for now, Drisya has a question. Irregular menstrual cycle is more common these days due to lifestyle changes than change in diet. So isn't NFP less reliable today?
Again, it's not, because natural family planning, the way that it's evolved, the new techniques that there are now, which are very simple and very inexpensive, take into account irregular cycles. They're not just looking at a month and making you live by that month that you charted. It's looking at every day. So when you have an irregular cycle, you know it. And you know when those fertile days are. Very easy to do and very easy to detect. And one of my favorite ways, the little machine called Clear Blue, where you test with, the woman tests her fertility through urine, through these little strips that you test. That does cost a little bit, but it's not very expensive. And then you know absolutely when you are fertile and when you are not by the test strips. But you can also detect through the other bodily systems just by watching your body and charting. But you have to pay attention. You can't say, oh, I did that once and there's my month and I'm going to live by this chart. No, you need to do your homework and know what your body is doing every day.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Camille.
Great
So
questions.
that brings us, yeah, I know, right? Great questions we had today. That brings us to the end of today's show. So thank you. Thank you so much once
You are
again,
welcome.
Camille, for those enlightening answers. I mean, I'm not going to forget those four key keystones or key pillars.
What are they, Johnny? Do you remember?
Oh, yes, I do. I've written it down. So, yeah. So, God is love, and love is unitive, love is creative, love is eternal, and love is faithful.
Very
So,
good.
yeah. Thank you there, Camille. So, that's one thing I'm not going to forget. And, yep. Have a great day ahead, Camille.
Awesome. God bless you guys.
Thank you
God
so
bless you.
much
Thank you.
again. Yes,
Bye.
bye-bye.
So, yeah,
Okay,
Neil.
yes,
Hold
Johnny.
on a second, Neil. Repeat those four, please. Repeat
Okay,
those.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
What?
do that.
I'm
It's
sorry?
cheating. It's cheating.
That's not cheating.
You
Okay,
wrote
I'm not.
write it down.
That's not my fault. I'm gonna do it one more time. You've got unitive, creative, eternal, faithful. Yeah, repeat.
Unitive, creative, eternal, faithful. That I can do.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't
okay,
you
okay.
ever forget that. Okay. So,
Okay, so
Neil,
since
you have
we're
an
going
announcement
to
or something?
Yes, we have a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
announcement to make. So we're going to do that very quickly. So I think yesterday morning onwards, we've been receiving a small forward everywhere on the WhatsApp groups, on Instagram, everywhere. This particular person, we saw his body. He was in a. I don't
Was
know.
wearing jeans.
Yes,
Was
he was
wearing
wearing
Nike. Was wearing
Yes,
Nike.
sneakers and a tracksuit. I don't know. I mean, so cool. And he was just a saint. I mean, just look at him. I mean, his face was glowing. So I think all of you already know who this person is. He is the patron of Catholic Chai. He's none other than Venerable Carlo Acutis, who is going to be beatified in the next 10 days or so.
Soon to be blessed Carlo Acutis.
Yeah.
So,
So the announcement that we are going to make is that we are going to start a 10-day novena from tomorrow.
a 7-day, Neil. 7
Sorry,
day.
a
Minus
7-day
3.
novena from
7-day novena.
tomorrow. Yes. So you guys can get excited about it. Yes, we already have Carlos exclamation marks and all. Yes. So hope you guys join in with us for this beautiful time as we're going to witness a young person like us, wearing sneakers and tracksuits and whatever, becoming a saint. I mean, on his way to sainthood. So hope you guys would join us in this beautiful time as we ask for his intercession. So as we end this time, we will end it with the glory be to the Father and to the Son,
Glory be to the Father and to the Son, to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
And our patron,
Venerable Carlo Acutis, please pray for us. So once again, this is Johnny Baby and Neil George signing off. Yeah, you complete the rest. Yeah.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye. And see you next week.
Bye, guys. Yeah. See you in 2 weeks, guys. Yeah. Something interesting upcoming for you.
Yes. Bye-bye.